Mark. My name is Kirk Christian. I'm the advisory chair for PACCIN. Today I'll be speaking with Dale Benson, who's the Chief Preparator at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, to talk about his experience in the reopening of his institution and what that's been like for him and his team. Hey Dale, how are you?
Great. Hi.
I think we met briefly back in 2011 during the AAM there. Me and Richard and I think Ashley were setting up a booth, and I don't know if start much longer back before then.
I started there in beginning of 2010. I've been there about 10 and a half years.
Okay.
Yeah. Previously, I was in Kansas City at the Nelson Atkins Museum. I was there almost 17 years before I came down here.
So you worked with Brent Powell there?
Brent Powell kind of took a young and dumb kid out of graduate school and put me to work back in the early 90s.
Nice. I think there's a lot of people have been talking about MFA Houston, just the articles we've read, and you know the fact that you're the first major institution in the country to reopen, and all of us are like still in the process of, I think, you know, California's starting, those guys are going back to work. On the East Coast, we're not there yet. We're still figuring it out. In Philadelphia, where I am, I'm part of a committee, a large committee of people working on reopening. So there's a small subcommittee of like collection care people, a head of art handling, myself, a registrar, and a conservator. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what kind of planning and what kind of people are involved and how far out you started that before reopening.
Wow. So we closed. I want to say we got I think my first email to all the managers was March 16th, and that's when we first were kind of enlightened that we are probably going to close the doors. And as you can imagine, it was quite a scurry to button up things. We were right in the middle of deinstalling a very large Norman Rockwell exhibition. And in fact, we were sent home in the middle of it. But we were brought back a few days later. We decided we need to get it packed up and finished packed up. And because the trucks coming hadn't changed. The trucks were still going to come and pick up the show. So we went back into the museum a couple days later and went ahead and finished that. And then we went home and we were in lockdown. March 24th, I think that's when Houston pretty much, that's when the mayor shut down the city and stay at home and all that. The museum put together a return to work task force. I think there was roughly 12 people maybe on that committee. And I think they assembled that group probably pretty soon, within like 3 weeks or so, I believe. And kind of across the board discipline of the kind of staff that were put onto that meeting. Obviously, you know, HR, guest services, you know, kind of right across the board, just kind of a sampling of people who are most affected by coming back to work, you know, essential personnel, which would be security. You know, security obviously was put on a staggered schedule, but you can't have guards not there. So, and then the building maintenance and engineers.
Well, you know, I'm sure it was like our own, and that they're covering such a huge breadth of like issues, and a lot of them don't apply to us, but like front of house visitor services and water fountains and bathrooms and temperature taking. But
yes,
for the sake of this interview and the fact that we're collection care people and this is PACCIN, I really wanted to hear specifically about procedures you developed for your own staff. So I'll kind of just launch into some questions about that, if you don't mind. Was your staff involved in the conversation about what those guidelines would look like with regards to your own group?
Yeah, I was contacted directly from HR. I think most of the managers at a certain level were asked to provide some input and possible solutions to how we could return safely. Does that mean a partial staff, a staggered staff? You know, a few in, a few out, work 2 or 3 days, and then, you know, switch. And that's what a lot of departments are still doing right now. Not necessarily my department. We've had a lot of projects going on with installs and deinstalls. I've had just about my entire staff there, actually. There's 14 people in my department, from mount making to collections, to exhibitions and whatnot. And we're spread out, which is kind of nice. We have 2 large main campus art buildings. We're building a 3rd right now across the street. I've actually been spending a lot of time with a hard hat on lately, going back and forth with the new building, the $475 million expansion. But bringing everybody back, I staggered them in for about 3 weeks. I was doing my very best to not have anybody there if they didn't need to be. Or if we came in and completed a project, I sent them home. Just didn't want to take any chances at that point. Unfortunately, we're seeing the spike now, and it wasn't a month ago or 2 months ago. We're at the worst of it right now in Houston. I don't know if you've been seeing the headlines, but we've been put in code red, which is, you know, the worst situation right now for Houston, and the numbers are pretty staggering. And I'm not quite sure what's going to happen, if we're going to be sent back home again. That's always a possibility. Listening to the governor and then our city officials, they're not on the same page.
Right.
So our director, Gary Tintero, has been communicating very closely with all the other museums in the museum district. We have probably 19 museums, all within walking distance, and he's on a daily basis. They're all communicating and deciding, let's all do this together. Let's try to assemble a commonality here. And it sort of worked and sort of hasn't, you know. But I think we opened before anybody else, obviously, and some of the others slowly after us.
I can imagine what that's like. You know, I'm only on the collection side now, so I hear, you know, what's going on with the exhibition people. I'm just trying to plan it all. It just sounds like a nightmare. I mean, because essentially there's only so much planning you can do, and there's so much uncertainty out there. So you answered a few questions there. One I had about the number of staff you had and satellite locations. You answered those, but is it difficult to kind of track all those people during the day? Do you have any kind of sign out system if someone leaves the campus altogether?
Yeah, and that's something we've had in place from the beginning. We, you know, the security checkpoints entering the building from 2 areas, you sign in and out every day. That's just what we've always done anyway. But there's different protocol now. You carry your own pen. You don't use somebody else's pen laying there on the desk as you sign out. And so I always got a pen in my duffel bag. Masks are absolutely mandatory, and you don't want to be called out on that. You know, everybody in the museum's wearing masks, guests and staff. There's hand sanitizer places to sanitize your hands all over the place. Those popped up everywhere, and the round circles on the floors for social distancing. All the areas where guest services is interacting with the public, brand new plexi barrier walls everywhere, and they did a lot during the shutdown, actually, to prepare the place for reopening.
Wow. Since you returned so early, how difficult was it for you to source PPE, especially nitrile gloves and such?
It was a little difficult at first. We have somebody actually on staff that's his new hat. That's what he wears, and he provides those supplies now for everybody in the museum. And he probably had the toughest job to go find everything, but not sure how he did it. But I saw up at the dock the other day, there's just pallets full of everything we need. Sanitizing towelettes and all the sanitizing liquid, masks, all that stuff. He was able to get it somewhere. And early on, I was actually going around myself just for my own department. I was hitting different places around Houston, and I found a few. There was a hardware store that I bought big bottles. I think it was a local brewery actually that was making this stuff. And it smells like tequila. I don't know. I'm ready to drink this stuff. But that got us by until we were able to get the stuff from our in-house supplier.
Let's see. One of the things that we discussed, a few of us, and it was discussed a little bit, I think, on one of the LACMA chats, was being dormant for so long, what it was like to come back to work physically. Because, I mean, we're so active in general, but after having been dormant and then you come back and you're wearing a mask, what was that like? How difficult a transition was that?
Well, as you've said, we have very physical jobs, and wearing a mask has been, for me, actually kind of the toughest thing to kind of get accustomed to. You feel like you're not getting enough oxygen sometimes, just moving stuff. And I'd have to say we probably have slowed our pace down a little bit. I think we take more breaks. We actually, within the museum, they've established a large auditorium for people to go just to decompress a little bit. You go in and you can spread out and sit in there, take your mask off. That's the one place you're allowed to go in and just take your mask off and sit and kind of chill for a little bit and rest, and then go back to work. Which that was very nice of them to think about that, because it is a reality.
Has like water been an issue? Because I know that's discussed a lot since they've kind of cut all the water fountains, like how people get water and food, and
Yeah, we bring in bottled water in one of our prep areas. We've got cases of bottled water, and that's always available to everybody, because all the fountains are covered. You can't use them. We discovered that immediately. It's like, oh, we need water. So we're running out to the store to bring bottled water in.
Are you using like established, I know some museums are calling them pod systems, where they're pairing people up that work together kind of independently, maybe even color coded, so they're staying with the same people?
We have not been doing that. Our gallery spaces are fairly large. In fact, this exhibition we just finished installing Friday, Soul of a Nation, it covers 5 or 6 galleries. It's a very large exhibition, and I had 5 preparators installing, so they were always very well spread out. Nobody's on top. Sometimes to pick up a sculpture or a painting, you got to be close, and we're doing the absolute best we can. There's always exceptions, but everybody's being extremely cautious, changing their gloves often, masks, and I've even asked them at the end of the day, wipe down tools, hand tools. And I need to look at what it would cost, but I'm kind of this close to everybody having their own tool bag. That's been discussed as well. But that as many people in the department, it would be quite an expense to do that. But that may be the new reality. That may be the new norm.
Yeah, you just answered several of my questions there, because I was wondering if you'd done an exhibition yet. Was the exhibition, obviously there weren't couriers on it, so that was.
Yeah, this was I think the Tate Modern originated this exhibition, and then it came to San Francisco, DeYoung, and it stalled, and that's when all this happened, because it was supposed to come to us much earlier than it did, and then the coronavirus hit, and it stalled, and we tried, because they had actually started to pack it up in San Francisco and then had to stop, and then we stopped, and then we just been kind of waiting until they could get back in and pack it up, and it just arrived here probably about 3 weeks ago, and we immediately got busy to install it. But it's an amazing exhibition. 60 some odd African American artists, and spans over 2 revolutionary periods of time, and actually very relevant for right now.
Sounds like it. What is do you hire like on-call or temp art handlers or fine art shippers to kind of supplement your team during exhibitions?
For installing and deinstalling, no, but we do use local art handling trucking companies for moving art for us. And I'm probably going to be hiring some people here within the next month or so, because I have a very large building to install with the opening in October. I think 237 square foot brand new building with 15 galleries that I got to get installed on top of everything else. So we're actually we're in hiring mode to bring in art handlers, full-time, temporary, and then we'll see after that.
So will you have people stationed at each location, or will you have to bring tools and carts and everything from one location to the other?
No, there will be equipment and tools and carts just for the new building that I purchased. We don't have to move everything back and forth. Luckily, everything's connected by tunnels here. So the new building has a brand new tunnel that runs from one of our buildings underground over to it. And there's another tunnel that runs from there to the new School of Art we just built that opened a couple of years ago. It's a large campus here. We've got, I don't know, like 9 buildings or something. Yeah.
Back in 2011, I think it had changed a lot. And because I lived there for 7 years, but that was a long time. I lived about a block from the museum. And I kept thinking about, I don't know how much outside work you guys do, but knowing how swampy and hot that weather is, like PPE in that weather must be a nightmare.
Yeah, and we do have a large outdoor sculpture garden, as you know, and it got bigger. When they built the art school, that expanded, and we brought in even more outdoor sculpture, a large Anish Kapoor stainless steel, very similar to the ones in Chicago, different shape. But and we're installing several new outdoor commissions for the new building. All this is going to be happening, and we're all going to have to be wearing masks, and I know, but I think that's the new reality right now.
How are your procedures with like handoffs between vendors and fine art shippers? Have you developed strategies around that?
Yeah, and a lot of that was actually those are guidelines set by the fine art shippers. And for example, some art coming in, crates coming in, they sent us ahead of time some of their guidelines, and their staff, for example, would move crates off the truck. We don't really help, and then we take the crates and move them ourselves. Or if we're taking crates to a truck, we take them to the dock, leave them there, and then they load themselves, so we're not on inside the truck at the same time.
Yeah, that sounds like kind of what everyone's been talking about. Let me see what else I've got here. Did you recognize pretty quickly that there were things that are like plans or procedures that have been drawn up that just weren't going to work? And are you kind of learning every week, like brand new things?
Well, the toughest thing for us obviously is the social distancing. You can't stay 6 feet away from everybody. That's the tough. But you're hopeful and relying on the protocol of even coming into the building. You're hoping that everybody there is COVID free, just because not only one, you have to what do they call it? If you have any symptoms, you have to self-identify those and send them to HR immediately. every time you walk into the building, they take your temperature. They've got a station set up, and it zaps your head to see if you're. And I think it's 100 degrees or more, you don't come in.
Right.
We've actually had a real life litmus test, if you want to call it that. So a local company was working with another museum, and somebody from that other company was exposed. They worked with this other museum, who in turn, a couple of those guys worked with a couple of our guys. I mean, you're going to find out how quickly the trickle down is, and as soon as you learn. And when I found this out, I'm trying to connect the dots real quick, and I sent 2 guys home that day. Not that they had it or knew, if they positively had it, it's just a protocol. You want to stop it immediately. And I sent them home, and I said, get tested, and you're not coming back for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And everything ended up being okay. Everybody was tested negative. It was all okay. But I think that's what we got to do. And it's probably going to happen in the most unopportune time. We're going to be trying to meet a deadline, and somebody says, "Oh man, I just found out I was with somebody last weekend who was, positive," and then you got to trace it all back. Who have they been around in a department or in the museum? And our museum HR is very transparent about this, and they've let us know when other departments have had circumstances like that. It's they don't give names out or anything like that. That's kept very confidential, but they tell everybody when something like that's happened, so that everybody's aware.
Yeah, you have to wonder too. I mean, just a kind of heightened state of concern about this. Like if even someone has allergies, or it's flu season, cold season, what that's gonna, how that's gonna shut things down. It's got to be in the back of your mind, especially going into an exhibition.
Well, I don't think this is going away anytime soon. My girlfriend's a nurse, and she's been a nurse for 25 years, and she's learning a lot in a lot of her teleconferencing with doctors and other medical professionals. And there's already a second strain of this, and I think it's going to become the new normal of just when we do finally get a vaccine, every year you go get, like you get a flu shot, you got to get a COVID shot. I don't think it's going away, and at some point we're probably all going to be exposed. That's my guess.
Have you been contacted by a lot of people, like peers at other institutions in the state or outside of the state, about this stuff?
Not actually, surprisingly, not many. I've had a few emails from other museums that I've worked with recently, and they just, "Hey Dale, how you guys doing? How are you coping with this?" And but not personally, not that many. But actually, our HR department sent out an email here the other day and listed all the different organizations, museums that have reached out to us to ask for advice. And of course, there's been all these articles in the paper about us opening early and all. That caught me off surprise. I didn't realize that we were. I figured everybody was opening. I didn't.
You're the first one. Back to PPE real fast. I was wondering, when you're working in really close proximity, within a foot or so, are you using any higher level, like a KN95 or an N95 in that circumstance?
Yeah, we do have the 95s, and we use them sparingly because those are definitely harder to get. And I explain that to everybody in the department that definitely use these sparingly because we can't get those like all the others. But it's important to change out the other ones, the regular surgical ones, often, every day if you can. That's what you should be doing.
And are those supplied by the museum?
Yes. Yeah, we have plenty of those. Yeah.
Before I turn it over to Mark for maybe a couple of questions, the other thing I wondered if there was like one piece of advice you could give anyone that's about to go through this, like that maybe they're not thinking about.
Um, I've been pretty diligent and communicating with my staff about how extremely important it is to, I mean, you've got to, it's a behavioral change now, and you've got to be smart and safe and proactive. I mean, you have to realize how you behave when you leave the museum can affect a lot of people and schedules and bring some things to a grinding halt. Our department is heavily relied on in meeting schedules and deadlines. And if all of a sudden half my staff or 3/4 of my staff aren't there to install art, that's going to be a big deal. That's going to be a huge deal. And I I think that self-reporting is very important too. I don't think that you shouldn't hide any symptoms or anything like that. And if you suspect that maybe, you don't feel quite right, or, you have a temperature, you obviously aren't going into work, and you need to contact HR right away. But we have a fairly resilient staff, and I love working with these guys, and they've been nothing but troopers through all this. And we were one of the last departments to leave the building when the lockdown went into place, and we were one of the first ones to come back, just based on necessity and some of the things that the director wanted to do while the building was shut down. They took advantage of, and again, it was a very skeletal crew, and everybody kept very good distance from one another, but there was some gallery rehancing going on, and a few things going on in the background even when the museum was closed. But it was minimal, but it was important to do.
The one thing I realized I didn't ask you that was on my list was, I would imagine you guys have your own museum truck and or van, and if you have designated staff for those and how that's changed. Because I know with our truck, I have people that drive, well, when we were open, to New York City every week, and within like a tri-state area. And, that a lot of major institutions have something like this, and trying to figure out what that's going to look like, because obviously those people are going to be put in really tight proximity for long periods of time.
Yeah, we don't do any long over-the-road driving. We do have an art truck and a Sprinter van for smaller trips. Again, we rely on a couple of local contractors for larger things like that. But we all are, with exception, I think 2-3 preparators, all of us do drive and use the truck and van on a weekly basis. But I've asked everybody to wipe everything down, just like your workstation or all the door handles in our work areas. When you're done with the truck or van, wipe steering wheel down, handles, everything. And I trust everybody's doing that. But we don't do any long hauls over the road. It's all local.
I think that's about all I have for now, but I was going to let Mark ask maybe a couple of follow-up questions, and then maybe I'll think of something else. Mark, do you have anything for us?
Sure. In regards to when you were first getting involved in reentry and the training, was the training done by department, or was it more of a collective effort through HR? Or I was kind of curious how that kind of was done, and has there been retraining along the way?
So training as in
how do you the new protocols for distancing, PPE, all that kind of thing?
Much of that has been spelled out in great detail with a number of emails from HR, and in no uncertain terms they've laid out the law, and what's expected of the staff, how we're to respond to certain situation, and the mandates are very firm. And you know what? You see somebody walk around a museum without a mask, you call them out on it. It's everybody has to be very responsible if all this is going to work, and if we're all be the most safe, you know.
What about the engagement of the employees? If there was concerns, you know, obviously everybody's nervous about just going to work, but then working. Has the museum done pretty well with keeping the staff engaged when concerns have happened? Because I'm sure there's case by cases coming up that, okay, this happened today. How do we address it for the future? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and with such a large museum, I think we have around 650 employees, something like that. There's a lot of different circumstances happening even within my department, and obviously there are some that have, for whatever reason, you know, more of a hesitancy to come in, and that's there. You know, you have to respect that. For whatever reason, and some it's literally a health issue. You know, there's certain categories that people are more susceptible for contracting the virus, and quite honestly, there's some staff that I've not even seen in 3 months. I mean, they've not been in.
I was going to ask, is there certain departments probably are still working at home?
Oh yes,
if possible.
Yeah, the policy is still in place, even though a lot of us have returned. The policy is still in place at the museum. If you can work at home, you stay home. It's just, you know what, you can't handle art from sitting on a couch at home or over a Zoom. You know, it's you gotta
exactly.
You gotta handle the art. You know, but there are obviously some departments that are, you know, walking through the curatorial department the other day. It's a ghost town. You know. You can hear the crickets, you know. That's not to say, I mean, they are coming in when needed. You know, I'm putting a hard hat on. We have to go over to the new building to look at spaces with the curators to pre-plan some of the installations, and they're all coming in and they're happy to do it. But if you can stay home, they're staying at home, which I think right now is the best policy.
Yeah. Is your staff doing full time, or is it kind of a limited amount of time on the job, you know, the workplace, or is it, you know, what's the dynamics of that, of your Pacific staff? I mean,
well, the last few weeks we've actually been in there pretty much on a full-time basis, just because of the large exhibition that we were deinstalling and then installing. Luckily, some of the current exhibitions have been extended, which is great. We've got a couple of them that they just right away extended them until several months down the road. We don't have to worry about that. But the current one we just installed required, you know, quite a few people. We have a large 60,000 square foot offsite storage facility, and I have 2 full-time preparators there. You guys may know Richard Henson. Yeah, that's primarily where he works out of. And that's a lot of our collection is stored in that one building, and so it's a busy hub. You know, a lot of trucks coming and going between the different museums. I got a full-time outmaker, and she's busy in her little area, and then the rest of us are spread out. You know, it's very unusual that there would be a group of 4 or 5 of us all congregating together very closely. You know, where I'm doing our best to kind of spread us out right now. But we're all at the moment we're there full time. Okay.
So I know some museums they're you know, with the fatigue and trying to work, especially with the exhibits. You know, they've been working about 5 hours on that kind of work and trying to do some work maybe at home, their paperwork or whatever. People kind of working up different ways of handling that kind of additional stress that's being put on the work. Anyway, I don't have any other questions. Kurt, do you?
Yeah, just a couple more. One question I had, and you talked like the staff has been pretty respectful about PPE and social distancing, but is there any kind of compliance measures or planning, and have you had issues with patrons, or, you know, kind of breaking the rules? Or,
you know, I've not heard of any. which is unusual. I mean, this is Texas, and people want to do what they want to do. But we have a very detailed rules on signs as you enter the building that a mask is mandatory, and then there's you stand on a spot and they take your temperature as you enter the building. So as far as I know, I've not heard of anything. As far as I know, everybody's being very compliant about that.
What about one thing I thought about? Have you, so far as security going into certain rooms, I don't know if you have biometric screening, if any of that's been affected.
No, yeah, biometric screening, or what do you mean? But
Print to get in a door.
I didn't hear you. Sorry, say it again.
A fingerprint identification to get inside of a door.
Oh no, we don't have. No, it's all it's keypads. You know, swipe pads and keypads. Yes, yeah, yeah.
I don't. You know, Mark and I can talk about this after, but I wonder. I'm sure when people watch this, they may have questions we don't, and how we can possibly field those to you without, you know, directly giving them your email address. But would you be okay with something like that?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I'd be happy.
For me, Mark, unless you have anything else.
Do you use face shields at all, other than just the masks? A lot of people are talking about using face shields, but
No.
in the practical world, do they make sense?
We are not using face shields, and that almost would kind of make me nervous. You know, what if it got bumped and fell off? You know, it's like having a pin in your
Yeah.
pocket and
Yeah.
falling into the yard or something. You know, it's just a cumbersome thing, I would think, when you're trying to move art. But we have not gone that far yet. But I know in other professions, a lot of people are wearing face shields.
Yeah. Well,
Have you found that the plans and protocols have had to change quite a bit, or has it pretty much been consistent with what originally was planned on how this was going to play out?
So far, we've not had to change course or change any protocols drastically. It's been pretty much how it was laid out to begin with. The museum has now started to offer the COVID testing, which I actually went Friday to go get my brain tickled. It's not pleasant. I don't know if anyone's done that yet, but anyway, it was mandatory actually for those on the front line. You know, the guest services, security, and then voluntary for other folks. And I went ahead and did it. Haven't gotten it.
How easy was it to get tested in your state?
In our state?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, locally, just to go get in line somewhere, apparently it's hell. It's tough. Very long lines and a lot of questions about, you know, insurance and this and that. And that's why I went ahead and took advantage of it, because they just did it right there in one of our admin buildings on campus. And I was I was in and out in 15 minutes. They brought two people to the museum. They did it right on campus.
Oh, perfect. That makes it, because a lot of states you have to have a doctor's, you know, approval to get tested. So
or
that hurdle,
or that you have to have symptoms and all that. No,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Kurt?
That's it for me.
Well, this has been wonderful. I appreciate the offer to help share any advice. I hope some of it's helpful. I don't know. We're all learning as we go. I mean, we're in the middle of this thing, and who knows what we're going to be thinking about everything, you know, even a month from now. But I hope some of that was helpful.
No, absolutely. And, you know, we'll be thinking about you guys. It does look pretty bad there right now. I hope it kind of flattens out soon. So I really appreciate your time, and we'll let you know as soon as this goes up on the website.
Thank you very much, Kurt, Mark.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.